The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jamison Rabbit, and this week I'm joined by a special guest, a face you know and love. It's Michael Seleskie. Welcome.
Glad to be here, Jamison. Hope you're ready. We got some big movies coming up. Summer blockbuster season's getting into full swing.
It sure is. It sure is. And we got some movies that it's an odd show where you and I saw a lot of movies separately.
Yeah, I mean, we got so much content that we had to split the content up so that everybody could get the most content.
That's right. All about the content. And so I am going to turn to you first for the big movie of this week. What did you go see?
I went and saw Albus Dumbledore and The Fall of the Weimar Republic.
Ooh.
I mean, excuse me, this Fantastic Beasts and the Secrets of Dumbledore. It's been 4 years since our last trip to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and let's see how many of these loose plot threads that you can pick up in this week's feature. Albus Dumbledore, played by Jude Law, is a man fronting a group of wizards and one muggle in their goal to try to stifle the plans of Gellert Grindelwald. How do they plan on achieving this goal? It's not really clear, but don't worry. That's the point, seemingly.
Oh, no.
Eddie Redmayne, Callum Turner, and many of the cast of the previous films of the Fantastic Beasts series are back, reprising their roles as characters with motivations that you'll barely remember. All kidding aside, this movie is deeply atmospheric, with an allegory so on the nose it would make Aslan himself weep. Gellert Grindelwald is played by Mads Mikkelsen, and he's trying to kickstart his war against the Muggle world. Conveniently for him, he's been able to shake the charges against him from the actions of the two previous films through machinations not at all explained. Clear of the allegations of crimes against the Wizarding World that everyone, everywhere has seen, he's free to stand for election as head of the International House of Pancakes. I mean, chief wizard of the International Confederation of Witches.
Ooh,
An election so important that it's decided sometimes, but not always, by whether or not a very specific newly born magical beast will bow in front of a candidate on live wizard TV. Election is a loose term, seeing as voting seems not really to be all that essential to the process. Why is Germany in 1930s a bad place to set a movie about electing a hate-filled genocidal tyrant? Ask your grandparents. J.K. Rowling continues in the tradition of time turners and the Weasleys' poverty by just not addressing why in the course of 1 year Johnny Depp's face has been replaced by Mads Mikkelsen's face. And nobody seems to comment on it. Why do we spend 2 movies with Ezra Miller's character only to have his character seemingly discarded? Ask Warner Brothers. If this plot synopsis seems to be random, introducing characters, dropping them without really explaining them, and leaving you no better off for having heard it, then good on me. I've accurately synthesized this experience of Fantastic Beasts, The Secret of Dumbledore, available now where all fine films are screened.
Bravo, sir. Bravo.
Oh, yeah. I'm a Potterhead, confirmed Potterhead, going way back. I'm a proud Hufflepuff at that. So Newt Scamander's my boy. But this movie was a tough watch.
Sounds like it.
I don't know what to tell you. The best synthesis I can tell you for this plot is that you start off with Gellert Grindelwald being on the run from the actions of the last movie, and you'll never guess that by the end of the movie, Gellert Grindelwald is on the run from the actions of this movie.
We bring it full circle.
Full circle.
That's how you set up multiple sequels.
Another way to say that is that you don't go anywhere in the plot. It just is. I thought there were some really good casting choices. Jessica Williams as Lally is fantastic. However, her accent is inexplicable.
Oh.
It's nice. I just don't know where it comes from or where it's going. She also is given almost no backstory. We know that she's a professor, we think, from the American Wizarding School, but we don't really know. Ezra Miller is so fast that his arc will make you wonder that if you blinked and you missed it. I mean, he seemed to be a big part of the first couple movies. He seems to have a part in this movie, but his conclusion for his character doesn't leave you a whole lot to chew on.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that I forgot Ezra Miller was in these.
Yep.
You mentioned it, and boy, the PR of Johnny Depp and Ezra Miller in your movie right now, not ideal.
It's been a 1-2 punch for what I think is the continuation of this plot.
Yeah.
I think what we're learning about these movies is what I've always sort of suspected. With these big overarching fantasy series, it's good to have a bunch of backstory.
Yeah.
It's good to have a canon of works that you can go back to. I mean, if you have never read any of the Harry Potter works, those first couple movies do a lot of world building.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all pinned down by the fact that you've got literally thousands of pages.
And that pays off in the end.
And it pays off. There's none of that here. Mm-hmm. So terms are brought up and seemingly dropped without really any understanding. There's not a whole lot of connection. They seem to have learned in these movies going forward from 1 to 3 that the more Hogwarts they can fit in, the better things are going to go for them. And the Muggle character is fantastic. Kowalski is still great.
I love him.
His character arc isn't much of a character arc either. He starts kind of being a bumbling Muggle, and he's still sort of a bumbling Muggle.
So let me ask you then: does this move the plot? Does this movie move a plot forward, or are we kind of spinning our tires as far as plot-wise for this universe?
If you couldn't guess by my plot synopsis, that's the problem I have with this movie, is that we end up in the same place that we started in this movie. Gellert Grindelwald is still canonically a problem for the story. Albus Dumbledore is still working on ways to defeat him, presumably. We sort of get rid of some of the magical MacGuffins from the last couple movies and replace them with other magical MacGuffins. I think that they're working towards something, but it seemed like they weren't ready to end the series quite yet.
Yeah, obviously. Well, what did you end up giving Fantastic Beasts?
As a confirmed Potterhead, I was very sad to say that I only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It's still a good watch, atmospheric-wise. If you are absolutely dying for more Harry Potter content, this will scratch that itch, but be prepared to want to see it a few times to catch what you missed, characters mumbling in the side.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's too bad. The movie I have on the marquee this week is a film called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It is from directors Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, collectively known as Daniels. They are the guys who brought you the film Swiss Army Man, which is one of my favorite insane films of recent years. It stars Michelle Yeoh as Evelyn. Evelyn is a middle-aged Chinese woman finding herself overwhelmed with her various responsibilities. We open by seeing her kind of buried under a stack of receipts as she is facing an upcoming IRS audit. She's also running the laundromat that her family lives above. She is dealing with a teen daughter who is seeking her attention constantly and wanting her mother to publicly accept her girlfriend and her lifestyle that she has. But unfortunately, Evelyn's father, played by James Hong, the patriarch of the family, has shown a history of not accepting things and shunning family members for things that he doesn't accept. And so Evelyn is kind of afraid to publicly admit that her daughter is homosexual and she has a girlfriend. And so this film starts to, it feels akin to Minari, about a film about a family unit trying to get through things. But then everything gets turned on its head, and Evelyn discovers that she has access to a multiverse of her lifetimes. The multiverse is not just for Marvel. A24 has a multiverse too. And she is tasked with stopping the villain of these multiverses, a character named Jobu Tupaki. And she needs to stop Jobu Tupaki by accessing and using the skills from each of her other versions of herself. Through this wild technique, she's able to jump to other versions of herself, constantly being faced with this force of Jobu Tupaki, who is trying to stop her. She jumps and she jumps back with knowledge and skills that she gained from previous versions or alternate versions of herself. But she doesn't understand why Jobu Tupaki is doing what she's doing. She doesn't understand what she needs to do to stop Jobu, or how she is supposed to save all of these multiverses. Her husband, who wonderfully is played by Q Huan, who you know as Short Round from Indiana Jones and Data from Goonies.
Okay.
Have not seen him in a long time. He is her husband who's very meek and quiet and reserved, but in these alternate universes, he is gives her advice, clues, helps her to discover where she needs to go. He's a very different person in these alternate universes. And she begins to ponder if she herself in this timeline is living her worst version of herself. She starts to wonder because she starts seeing herself in all these other timelines going, well, these are all glamorous. And this is, because in other ones, she's glamorous, she's powerful, she's successful, she's an actress, she's a star, and all these, she's an accomplished martial artist, all these things. So the plot of this movie, though, is kind of impossible to explain. So much is thrown at you. It's broken into 3 chapters: the everything chapter, the everywhere chapter, and the all at once chapter. But the visual style that you're presented with is the star of this movie. It is so insane as we suddenly start traveling through these multiverses. And the visuals and the way that they do it, and there's, in one branch of her timeline, everyone in the world has hands made out of hot dogs. Just saying.
Oh.
In one version, there's a section of this film where it's 2 rocks having a conversation because she's jumped into a version where she is a rock. And so is Jobu Tupaki.
Yeah.
And there's a running joke about her misunderstanding, her broken English of misunderstanding the film Ratatouille with a film called Raccoon Tooie. There's a running joke about that where in one universe, she's a chef and she finds underneath the chef's hat a raccoon.
Oh.
And that's a kind of running bit. And it's this great film that has homages to so many genres. Like, it's a film that loves films. As she appears in these different timelines and lifetimes. And you have these legendary actors. Michelle Yeoh, great actress of Chinese theater, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, all these things. She's great. She used to do some amazing fight choreography in here. She's fighting Jobu Tupaki in different timelines. James Hong, who to me is always the bad wizard in Big Trouble in Little China.
Mm-hmm.
He's great as the grandfather. Jamie Lee Curtis is in here as well as the IRS lady who's kind of coming down on them, and she keeps reappearing in the film.
So let me ask you this. It appears that, I've been an A24 fanboy for a long time.
Sure.
This seems to be a departure from them. Normally they've come out with some really good indie horror classics, in the past 5 years. That's how they came on my screen. So I was waiting for this to kind of go in a horror aspect.
Not at all. It's more mystical, sci-fi. Actually, it's kind of bends all these genres because they jump into so many different kinds of genres. Mm-hmm. It feels like 40 different small films inside one film because you can kind of do whatever you want. It reminded me, okay, so these guys, the directors, the Daniels, did Swiss Army Man, which I don't know if you ever saw. It was the film with Paul Dano, Daniel Radcliffe. 2 buddies, one's a dead body, one's a corpse,
right? Absolutely. Hard to miss that promise.
Traveling on flatulence alone. Like, insane. This reminded me of another film that came out maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Sorry to Bother You, with Lakeith Stanfield, where he's a call center operator. That
I remember that movie
suddenly
very,
goes
very well.
wild.
Yep.
This reminded me a lot of that, where I never felt like I was on sure footing of what was going to happen next, where things were going.
Yeah.
Every time I thought I did.
I remember the twist at the end of that movie being epic. I actually enjoyed that movie.
And so this kind of reminded me a lot of that, of like, I've never seen this before. I've never seen a film like this before. I've no idea what's going on. I'm still not 100% sure I know what happened in the movie.
Yeah.
But the cast is incredible, and really true that the ending is masterful because they stuck this landing when you realize through all this craziness that at its heart, it's a film about relationships, between spouses, between a parent and a child, and a film about healing and how you can, that misunderstandings are allowed to kind of fester and create pain and to create just division in relationships.
Yeah, and I think movies that center on the concept of the multiverse, we're getting another big multiverse movie here in a little bit. I think that they don't go quite as far as they could. And it sounds like this kind of went, they turned the contrast scale up quite a bit, because when you look at multiverse movies, they're like, what if somebody made this decision differently, or what if this in the past turned out to be differently? Sounds like we're in scenarios where you've got hot dogs for hands. We're all conscious rocks. We're really going off on a space trip.
All for it. They did not pull back at all, and it's just visually beautiful. It was really, really enjoyable. It seems like it's so simple when you just think about the concept of this multiverse, but it's so complex. And I always am looking for, and one of the reasons that I've always championed A24 is because they love original thought. They don't make a lot of sequels. They love original ideas. You got something that's a little crazy, but we haven't really seen it before on screen. Here's some money. Let's make it happen.
You know, that was kind of always the basis of some of Hollywood actors was you did a safe movie and then you did
one for me.
Yep, a passion movie, then a safe movie. It feels like A24 is doing that, where they're coming out with rock solid horror stuff to fund maybe some of their more edgy, avant-garde, kind of push the envelope kind of stuff, and that can lead to some great stuff. It can lead to some different stuff.
It can, and I'm really excited that this has gotten huge word of mouth. Like I'd heard people saying, like, this movie, oh, it's so great. All the things that I'm saying, and I'm so glad it lived up to it. It exceeded those expectations. I try not to listen to critics, because what do critics know, right? They're all just bombastic morons. But it exceeded those expectations that I had coming in, which is really incredible.
And that's one of the things about going to movies that you don't really know a whole lot about. I mean, so much of Hollywood right now is based off of IP that you already know, based on stories that you already know, stuff that people aren't willing to put in big money.
It's been proven to make money, so we'll just make it again.
But it's always interesting when you see original IP coming out, new stuff, because that's the stuff where you walk out of the theater going, I had no idea what to expect. And I'm glad I was able to come out with that experience and tell other people about it.
It's been a while since I walked out of the movie like giddy. I had to call my son while I was in the parking lot. Like, let me tell you about this movie. You have to go see it. Come on, I'll go see it again. So it's really, really enjoyable. And so Everything Everywhere All at Once gets, I believe, my first 5-star rating of the year. It's the best movie I've seen so far this year. Really, really enjoyable. A24 scores again, but
sounds like I got to make a trip to a theater.
Yeah, definitely make a trip. It is playing in theaters near you. The last film we have on the marquee this week, sir, is what?
We're going to be talking about Father Stu.
Hey, I saw that one.
Well, we both saw that movie. Hey, look at that. Father Stu is brought out here at the tail end of Holy Week. Father Stu tells us the story of Stuart Long, played by Mark Wahlberg, a man from Montana with a troubled life, an absentee father played by Mel Gibson, who didn't really have to stretch his acting muscles too hard to play this character.
He's leaning into that character.
Oh boy. Stuart is trying to make it the best he can in the world, first as an amateur boxer, and then he tries to move to Hollywood in hopes of becoming a film star. He becomes smitten with a local girl, but record scratch, she's Catholic. Stuart now devotes his time to becoming a Catholic so he can date his girl. Sadly, after a night of drinking, he's involved in an accident which leaves him clinging to life. Upon waking up, he tells his gal that he's going to become a priest. Becoming a priest is hard enough, and then Stuart is diagnosed with a degenerative muscle disease that is going to rob him of his mobility and eventually his life. The diocese is not willing to have Stuart be ordained as a priest, presumably because the diocese would be financially responsible for the medical costs going forward. But as the name of the movie implies, Stuart eventually becomes ordained and serves as a testament to suffering and its effects on the human spirit. This was a difficult movie for me to review. I'm a practicing Catholic, and as such, I am very susceptible to its message. It happens to be very close to my own personal ideology, and the priest's sermons on suffering is an accurate distillation of my own beliefs. That being said, it's not a perfect movie. It's a little slow, and it has quite a bit of foul language for a movie that I think is marketed for an adult Christian audience, especially when Marky Mark is very young. And I can't help but feeling that watching this is being complicit in the rehabilitation of Mel Gibson's career. But the movie is fine, and the message has stuck with me since viewing it. People act like we're humans trying to have a spiritual experience when we're actually spirits trying to have a human experience. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the movie, because I know that you don't come from this particular ideology.
Right, yeah, I'm not Catholic, Christian, but I was surprised, like kind of like you said, I was sitting there thinking like, well, this would normally be a film at this time of year in this subject matter that you'd have groups going to. Yeah, the church group is going to see this, and I'm just watching going. At one point, I'm wondering if he's channeling his Dirk Diggler character from Boogie Nights as he's failing in Hollywood, and I was like, oh, this is getting uncomfortable. I really enjoy it. I think Mark Wahlberg, I can kind of take him or leave him, depending. I don't know that he was the best choice for this role because he does have a narrow focus, I think, of his acting ability. I think he was good enough in this movie. I thought I was along for the journey of a guy who, it's a tale of redemption. A guy who's fighting for something when nearly everyone in his life is telling him, no, we don't believe in you. No one believes in you. And when he finally starts to get people to start to believe in him, then of course he's stricken with this rare, horrible disease, and still he doesn't give up. And it's easy to doubt him and to see him as like just this crass guy and all that. But I enjoyed that part of the story. I enjoyed the part that he wasn't the vessel that a lot of people thought the Lord would choose.
Yep.
And that he saw that he was. But the flip side of that is there's one character in the movie that I thought was such a horrible Hollywood cliche and just there for unnecessary drama. And that was of his rival, I guess, in the seminary, who was the snobby guy who,
the guy who's
the perfect Christian.
Holier than thou. He's more Catholic than the Pope.
I just felt like that's not a real character.
Yeah.
And it just served to show two shades of something, but...
And actually, I think if you wanted another character to play opposite Mark Wahlberg in this movie, they had a great one in Aaron Moten, I thought, who played the character as Ham.
Yeah.
I thought he was fantastic.
Yes, I wish he would have gotten more screen time.
Absolutely.
I was very invested in him, and he seemed to really care. He was like the only one who actually believed in Stu. Let's talk about Mel Gibson real quick. First off, oddly that Mark Wahlberg has hitched his wagon with Mel Gibson because Mel Gibson played his father in Daddy's Home 2. And now he's back playing his father again. I'm like, wow, you're really like, I want Mel Gibson to be my dad.
Yeah, and like to me, Mel Gibson doesn't age throughout this whole movie. They appear not to use the aging technology that they have. Yeah. So he appears to be the same curmudgeonly old grumpy man basically from day one in the movie. And we see Mark Wahlberg's character go from being quite young to being quite old.
Yeah.
But we don't see Mel Gibson change at all. I thought Malcolm McDowell was a really interesting choice for the Monsignor Kelly.
Yeah.
He's played some really weird movies in the last 5-10 years. I think this was a solid role for him in what is essentially just a bit character as the guy in charge of the diocese.
He could have been a real caricature of that guy, but he showed some heart to him and some understanding. I liked him, Jackie Weaver as his mom. As Stu's mom, who's been the enabler, who's been struggling since losing her other son. I liked her in this. I found myself more engaged than I was expecting to be going in.
Yeah, there were a couple of movies that were kind of playing in my background, in my head while I was watching this. And I kept, every time that, this movie had a deal with his brother having passed away.
Right, yeah.
I felt like somebody was going to walk through the room and say, the wrong son died.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
I was waiting for the wrong son.
I knew
died.
Mel Gibson was going to say that at some point.
Yeah.
Just you could feel it. Yeah.
And the other thing that I really thought about this movie, and this is another odd tangent, but one of my favorite comedies growing up as a kid was Dogma.
Yeah, sure.
And the character played by Selma Hayek in that movie at one point says that Catholics don't celebrate their faith. They mourn their faith. And this, to me, almost seemed like a retort to that. I thought about that quote while I was watching that movie. I really thought this movie was a lot better than it had any right to be.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. What did you end up giving Father Stu?
I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Like I say, it's a good movie. I like the theology personally, but it's not perfect. It's not something that I think you're going to walk out of the theater saying, I can't wait to go see that again. It's not a popcorn movie by any means.
I don't know.
But it's I think it's a very solid film.
I agree. I believe I also gave it 3 stars. Let's see what the judges say. Oh, I gave it 3.5. Look at that.
Look at that.
Sometimes I put my scores in advance. Enjoyable. Like I say, Mark Wahlberg, it's funny because I saw him in a movie earlier this year, Uncharted, where I was like, Mark Wahlberg, come on. Just phoning it in. And this one is much more believable.
Absolutely.
Enjoyable. Although I was frustrated with the point that he moved from, Montana out to L.A. to live his dream. And then at one point, he needs a vehicle for a job interview, and he just shows up at Mel Gibson's work site, like unexplained.
Yeah,
Shows up, kids in the car, like, wait a minute, his dad lives right here?
That was a leap in logic that I didn't quite understand, because when he moves out to Hollywood, it's very clear that he doesn't plan on...
I don't know anyone.
He doesn't know anybody, and he's not going to spend... He knows that his father is out there, but he's not going to search him out. And then all of a sudden, he just knows where his father is and where his father's vehicle is. That, to me, was a bit of a logical...
Bit of a jump. All right, let's move on to what we have on our streaming spotlight this week. We turn to Netflix for a film called Choose or Die from director Toby Meekins. Stars Iola Evans as Kayla. Kayla is a young woman who discovers a long-lost video game from the 1980s called Cursor. She realizes that there's a prize that comes with it that has never been claimed. So upon booting up this game, she realizes that each level of this text-based infocom game adjusts itself depending on her situation, offering her horrible scenarios that she must choose, or it will choose for her. The game is beautifully voiced by Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself. And once she is forced to choose between the scenarios, the horrible scenario plays out directly in front of her. So you see such things as somebody getting their tongue cut off because it says the tongue or the ear. And you're like, I don't know, tongue. Boom, somebody's, my tongue got cut off. People eat, poor waitress, the first time she plays this game, just eating glass in front of her because that's the scenario that she chose. It's rough. She gets her friend, who is a programmer named Isaac, played by Asa Butterfield, to help her figure out how to beat this game before everyone around her is dead. So it borrows heavily from other slasher type flicks that featured technology as like the main source of horror. Films like Shocker or Ghost in the Machine or Dreamscape. A lot of these were like technology is going to be the thing that kills you. It's a fun enough premise. The movie never really delivered for me though, because outside of those moments in which the characters interacted with the game, I was left feeling really dull because there's really no character growth, no explanation for these characters, who they are, why they're chosen by this game or anything like that. There's really nothing for these lead characters to do in between these moments. I'm not sure there was really even a message to this movie at all. It just seemed like very random to me.
To me, the premise sort of felt like it was like living out a creepypasta. I don't know if you guys know what a creepypasta is.
Absolutely.
Like an internet horror story.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
It's okay. It seemed like a film that will be land on the forgotten heap of previous films, kind of like this, where you're like, oh yeah, what was that Choose or Die again?
If you liked this, you might like.
Yeah. And so it's sitting over there on Netflix. I wasn't blown away by it. I love Asa Butterfield. I've liked him since he was a young man, and he was just kind of wasted there as just the buddy. And so, I mean, ultimately, I can't really give it a recommend. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It's not actively terrible, but it's not worth your time, especially when there's better movies out there right now to go check out. So go ahead and skip that, but don't skip the next part because we're talking about what is coming soon. We're looking at the weekend of April 29th. We have, oh, buddy, get ready for this. First film out is a film called Memory. It's Liam Neeson's newest film. He's really branching out this time. It's from director Martin Campbell. He's the guy who brought you Green Lantern. Liam Neeson is an assassin for hire who finds he's the one with a target on his back now. Hopefully, he has the special skills required in which to save himself. It's Liam Neeson for you. He loves diverse roles. We also have a film called Last Survivors, in which a father and a son who have been living off the grid for 20 years encounter an outsider who could destroy their utopia. I love movies like this. One of my favorite movies, Leave No Trace, was a film like this. This one stars Alicia Silverstone, though, so haven't seen her in a while.
Wow.
Yeah. We also have a film called The Takedown, which is a French buddy cop flick with 2 cops who are opposites but get paired together to go undercover for a big case. This is from director Louis Leterrier, who brought you the Transporter films and The Incredible Hulk. It's an exciting week coming out April 29th. Before we move any further, though, we want to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, the Palace here in Sun Prairie. We thank you for showing us these movies. I want to give a shout out to our old friend Tom Reichelt. Great guy, helped me out this week. Thanks a lot, Tom. We always appreciate you guys. Next week, I'm going to be talking about movies like The Northman, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, and the animated film The Bad Guys. I'll be joined by Jeff Robbins for that, so put your mouth guards in and buckle up. It's going to be a fun time. So once again, it was great having you on. I love the reviews. Your intros are beautiful.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. It's a joy to come on here and talk about something that I really enjoy watching.
Absolutely. All right. Well, until next week, I'm Jamison.
And I'm Michael.
Thanks for watching.